Barry, I'll start with you because I've already spoken to everyone in the cast, and I will say that everyone pretty much admitted the reason why they signed on was to get to work with you, both by
Hmm.
reputation and then just by what you did, which is a huge testament. But this has been a long-term passion project of yours. So walk us through when you first sort of wanted to adapt this Pulitzer Prize winning novel and then how you were able to finally get it to the screen.
Yeah, I guess it began when I was a kid and I heard the words Underground Railroad and I saw black people on trains underground. It was real to me. And I've always held on to that feeling. And I was a big fan of Colson Whitehead's work. I tried to option his first book, The Intuitionist. Didn't get that one. And when I heard that he had written a book titled The Underground Railroad, I just knew he had done something that was different with it. And then I read the book, and those suspicions were confirmed. And this was even before Moonlight premiered at Telluride. I said to my reps, we got to get to this guy because I have to adapt this book, and it has to be a series, not a feature. And so it started, I guess, 5 years ago now. The whole process.
Oh wow, that's incredible. And too, so you, this is your first big like leading work reading film. And I'm just curious, the casting process, because to Barry's testament, he loves getting new faces. And so I love that you're involved in this, but I mean, that's gotta be crazy. First shot out the gate. Let's talk about it.
I started the process in November 2018 when I first got the brief. And for me, it was really about, taking in this because all I had were the sites. I didn't know that it was based on a book at the time, and seeing something that I knew would personally challenge me in my craft, and that come what may, I would grow from it. So I went and I auditioned, but I put it at the back of my mind because I was like, first of all, I don't even have the accent, but I'm still gonna put my best foot forward performance wise, and hoping that they would see me and kind of keep me in mind for something else in the future. And then in 2019, January 2019, I'd taken time off just to, come to the States for the first 2.5 months. And it was a case again of, I'm going to learn as much as I can while I'm here. And even if nothing comes from it, I know that it's stuff that I can use back in South Africa. So I got into a work session with Francine Maisler, who was the casting director for the show. We worked, she challenged and pulled me left and right. And then that evening I was told that it was a callback and that Barry wanted to meet me. I met Barry the next evening and we just had a conversation, just about anything and everything. And that's when I found out that it was based on a book. And so in those 2 weeks before the test shoot, I then read the book like 2.5 times to make sure that I was more than prepared by the time it came to the final audition.
Wow, that's incredible. Barry, I have to ask you about it because I know how you do casting and how dedicated you are to finding the right face, whether it be their first or their fifth feature. Talk about how you knew that she was the one to sort of be our avatar through this journey across this sort of episodic story.
Yeah, it was. I think sometimes it's a feeling, and I think anyone can walk in. If you can show me the character and give me that feeling, then the role is yours. With Tuso, it was very clear, for a character like this, if you're creating it with fidelity to the period, the idea of expressing herself verbally or externally, that is very checked. This person doesn't have full possession of their personhood, but internally has complete possession, of their personhood. So I was looking for someone who, as you said, you use the word avatar. I think it's a beautiful way of describing it because so much of what Cora is feeling, Tuso has to express, through body language or through very subtle facial gestures, not big facial gestures, because you had to communicate out in the open without the communication being noticeable. And I could just tell that Tuso had all those things in droves. I didn't realize, how much she related to the character. I didn't realize, I couldn't know how much work she would do to build the character in her own time. She's one of the hardest working women in show business, one of the hardest working human beings in show business. And I just knew, I could just feel it.
I love that. The testament's in the what we saw, because I was very blessed
Exactly.
to go ahead and see it, and so I can't say I can't wait for folks to see this, because it's a very like hard watch, but I can't wait for them to see your beautiful performance and what you guys were able to create, scored by everything that Nick did. I have to talk about Nicholas Patel, because I think, I'm the biggest queen of the two of y'all's fan club together.
The Nicholas
Separately,
Patel hive.
seriously though, but the two of y'all collaborating, but not just him. Joy came back to this, and so many of the Moonlight folks from the cinematography. It's important to you to bring back these collaborators. And what was it like switching it up to episodic? Did it feel the same, or did you have to come up with some new shorthand for this type of storytelling?
No, it felt the same, or we strove to make it feel the same. The only difference is the amount of time you have to create every experience. I think a feature film is a very bespoke experience because you have so much time to focus on, a very small amount of details, given as you're dealing with 100 pages. This is like 500 pages. And so it's kind of harder to tailor each moment the way you normally would. But I think having the same creative team, the shorthand that's implicit in that allows you to cover more ground. And so we try to approach it the same way. I also think too, because the subject matter is so heavy, I think being surrounded by people who you love, who care about you, and who care about you and who love you, it makes that work. I don't know, not that it made it easier, but it just made it more achievable. And so I do think, I don't know that we could have made this show without this collection of people, at least not in the way or with the energy that we made it.
Yeah, when I first started this, I was talking to folks about, the toll of the shoot, but everyone came back with, yeah, it was, but Barry put a lot of guardrails in place with advisors. But the thing everybody talked about too, so was the fact that it created this sort of like gallows humor amongst the cast, and that you guys really felt the need to turn up off camera. So I want to talk about that now. I want to talk about how you guys were able to laugh through the gravity of what you had to do every day. I think William said, he's like, so long as it didn't compromise what we had to do on camera, we were cutting up.
No, 100%, 100%. I even have a video where I randomly pulled Barry aside and I'm with William and I made us do the wave.
That's
and Barry
right.
goes, so I'm tired. I'm gonna post that video, Barry. I'm actually waiting for the perfect time to post that video. But that was, the general energy. Like, we were very aware of what it is that we were creating, very respectful of it. But we did what we needed to do in between the moments to take care of each other. And one of that was just enjoying each other's company, whether it be on set, in between the moments. I had a thing where I went around, breaking people's knees because, they looked a bit tense, and then on weekends going out for bowling, going to the beach, and just being comfortable in each other's space like that. That for me was a difference maker. And
I want that.
I'm gonna post it.
I want that video.
Do what you do, man. Do what you do. Hey, I got some videos and some photos too. All right.
I love it. Aaron told me that it went down in the DMs to begin, as far as you guys first contacting each other. So
I'm the one that reached out to him first, because I'd already arrived in Savannah, and so I was just like, "Oh, you're arriving tomorrow. Hey, I didn't want it to be like, that awkward first meeting, just like break the ice." And we clicked instantly.
We definitely talk about magical realism in this. And if you could just quickly tell me how you were able to sort of balance the fantastical element of the story, being the real railroad as opposed to a network of people, and the realities of everything that you kind of had to portray on screen, and do both authentically.
Yeah, I think part of it was just through research. I mean, we when we talk about Afrofuturism, we always think of it as people in space or Sun Ra and things like that. But I look at my ancestors, and through the research, I think of the Afrofuturism of what they must have gone through. Their bodies were restricted, which means their minds must have been so completely activated. And so I was always trying to find these very grounded, these very tactile symbols that could be carried from one place to another. And in them being either passed on from generation to generation or traveling from one place to another place, they kind of gain this almost sublimated experience, you take these things that are around you and you create the spiritual buffer you need so that these people can endure, so that myself and Jacqueline can sit here in 2021 and have this conversation about this piece of art designed to honor them. And so, yeah, it was one of those things that I was always trying to be aware of. I told our production designer, trains are not going to levitate in this show, but we are going to sublimate them. We are going to sublimate them. And that was always the through line.
Man lost my mom, then me. Ain't no way he ever given up on finding me.
I have to say, obviously Barry is such an incredible filmmaker. And although this is his first foray into television, I imagine it was quite incredible to get cast in it, knowing, this is the man who made Moonlight and Beale Street. And he was bringing all of those folks into this one as well.
Yeah. I mean, the second my agent was like, Barry Jenkins, oh, yeah. yes. That's the first thing I said. And I was like, of course, like, I don't, there's no way I'm not going to do this. But, on a serious note, I think I hadn't read the book when I got approached, but it was on my to read list. I was aware of it. So it gave me an incentive to read it. But particularly after I read it, I just had no doubt in my mind that he was the right person to adapt something like this, because he has such a brilliant sensitivity when it comes to telling stories about difficult things, about Black people, and he tells it in such a kind of special way that I was there. I was there before he even knew I was there,
Yeah. And like I said, because it's Barry Jenkins, of course, he's going to assemble this incredible cast of folks. But that being said, this is very sensitive material. And I know that they were very thoughtful on making sure that everybody on set didn't let the toll of what you're having to portray on screen sort of take it at home. So talk about that. I heard there was therapy advisors on set, that there was a real, again, just a sensitivity to, yes, we're going to be showing Black pain, but we don't want it to be exploitative.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there were counselors, there were numbers to call. Barry warned us before we went to the plantation set that it looked very real, and he made a real point of saying to people, be prepared, because it looks real, and it did, and he was aware that the even just the visuals of something or being suddenly in that environment can be extremely triggering, but also he was always checking in with everyone, after each take, and we were all checking in with each other as well. So there was a real vibe on set that made sure that everyone knew that it was our group responsibility to look after each other and ourselves, which was so important because, none of us wanted to take this on into our lives, but it was important that we were able to feel safe enough to really jump into the deep end with the work, and make sure that we were really doing the story justice, doing the people justice as well, doing the memories of those people justice. So yeah, that was one of the best experiences I've had in terms of care on set and consideration for the team.
I love that. And it's necessary, obviously, with such weighty material. I mean, this is based on a Pulitzer Prize winning novel in which magical realism is how it's sort of thought, because the Underground Railroad is an actual railroad in this. And there's a lot of expandings of what we consider real, but it's also completely exactly the things that happen. And I was just curious, sort of set the stage for folks on how you guys are going to make that balance between the sort of imagined and the real life people, and what they should expect.
I think what's so great about the magical realism in this is that the magic kind of speaks for itself, and that the characters don't really have to do anything magical. They're just people, they're just people who, there's a railroad, there's a train, and it's real. And I think actually it's more important for us to really engage with it as something that is real, because that is where you get the true humanity of these characters, and that's where you get the authenticity of them, and that's where you don't lose the gravity of the actual story. As you're saying, this is that there are so many elements of this story that are true, and I think it's important to make sure that those are prioritized and preserved, and that the magical aspect of the story, particularly in terms of the train, is something that comes in to actually support the story rather than to overtake it. I really feel like it does that. I feel like there's something so extraordinary about being able to see what essentially was just a network of people in the real story of the Underground Railroad, manifested into this kind of physical thing. But I think it's definitely coming from the true story rather than something that's being imposed on top, you know? So it still feels grounded and rooted in something authentic.
Nothing was given. All was earned.
Working with Barry, though, I'm just curious, after, Moonlight, I would imagine, he can pretty much do whatever he wants. And so what was it like getting the call to know that you were going to be working with him on his next project?
Yeah, that's a great question. That was such a surreal moment for me. And it's actually a really interesting story, the way that he actually even discovered me, because he had flown to the UK to see Andre Holland at the Globe Theatre as Othello. And it just so happened that I was also in that show playing Cassio, which is Othello's lieutenant. And that's how he even discovered who I was. And he sent me a direct message on Twitter and just showed his love and support, and appreciation for what, the cast did, and said, in a nutshell, I'd love to connect and make something happen. And then over a certain amount of time, the Underground Railroad happened, and the rest is history. It was a dream come true, and it still is a dream come true.
It goes down in the DMs. That actually makes me feel better about keeping social media just a little bit, honestly. Jokes aside, this was not an easy endeavor. That's why I wanted to go ahead and frame it as it was, because as beautiful as everything that y'all created, I know it had to take a toll. But, Barry's talked about it. They had on-set therapy advisors. Just physically being a Black person walking onto a plantation that looks authentically staged as it did back then is a toll. And even more so, I would imagine, as a Black Brit, and that added part of going to sitting in an American setting to this scene of bondage. How did you guys tackle that and approach it every day?
What you just touched on something that was really important during this whole project. Barry created such a safe and supportive environment for everybody, and handled everything with such care and sensitivity. He ensured that we had a guidance counselor on set at all times. And, irrespective of whether you utilize that service or not, it's just the knowing that it's there that gives you a sense of calm. And that comes from knowing that if ever anything gets too much or too overwhelming, there is someone who can help you out of that space. And yes, it was very, very, very challenging and upsetting and harrowing. And at the same time, I reflected on the magnitude of strength that these people had in order to overcome and endure these circumstances. And ultimately, just overcome it. Yeah.
And the purpose for it, I think will be seen when folks see it, because this is a story that's a magical, realistic tale about the real things of the Underground Railroad, but it's portrayed as if it was an actual railroad. And I'm just curious, there's a suspension of disbelief you have to take in some aspects of the story, but then there's some completely, you can't shy away from it, absolutely brutally realistic aspects to it. And I'm just curious, is that more difficult than doing something high fantasy like Krypton, or even maybe old horror? Or is this more difficult, that delicate balance of magical realism where maybe only certain smaller aspects are sort of shifted for the storytelling?
I think for me personally, dealing with subject matter like this is always going to be the most challenging for me, and the most sensitive for me, because it's connected to the diaspora, and this is a story about the African American experience specifically, but that still I still feel a connection to that, and I still feel deeply saddened that this was an experience that the diaspora had. So it was very challenging and very uncomfortable. And I think that will always be the most challenging stories to take on.
There's anger in you. It'll fuel you, yes, but
I have to say with this one, as a filmmaker yourself, I would imagine working with Barry was a huge draw to signing up to do this one. So talk about working with him and what made you want to sign on.
Well, I'd heard through the grapevine and conversations with actors and crew how much they loved working with Barry, and I loved the things that he makes. So when I heard about Underground Railroad, I actually railroaded Barry. I was like, came up to him at an event, and I was like, "Hey man, I've heard about this thing that you want to make, and I'm really basically I was telling him I would like to work with you, and then I read the material and I was like, do I really, really want to work with him if I have to do this,
Yeah.
But I really trust him. I trusted the material. I trusted the extra insights that we get into Ridgeway that don't make us want to sympathize with him, but help us to understand how a person can be shaped, that made it all worthwhile.
Yeah, you bring me to my next question, which is, with any work like this, being the character that you're playing, let's be honest, the biggest racist, most just visceral person on the screen, antagonizing these folks in a lot of these things, it's difficult to say yes to it. And more importantly, I know it was a tough shoot for everyone, but how did you balance that on set? Because I know, speaking with Fassbender and Youngo, both of them talked about how they had sort of an unspoken language of how they dealt with it every day. They wouldn't say anything to each other, but they give each other like a hand signal to say, I know.
Yeah, we had to really look after each other. I think, I would go to work going, oh, I'm going to do these terrible things. But then I was always reminded that Tuso and other actors had to have those terrible things done to them, which I think is worse. In the pretend aspect of it all, none of it's fun. That said, there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of joy and a lot of love in the show as well. And it's not. I think it's good for audiences to know it's not all bleak. It's interesting though. I am. Michael Fassbender and I did have a talk about this, because he said, oh, look, I did it for the space of one movie. And he said, good luck inhabiting that headspace for 6 months. Or it was like 8 months, I think. And I didn't really know the gravity of what he was saying until I was sort of deeper into it and just realizing, yeah, it was tough. But we all looked after each other. That was the spirit of the team, was that, I wasn't able to sustain keeping to myself. Yeah. I had a really close little pod relationship with Homer, with beautiful Chase Dillon, but we could enjoy each other in between cut and the next action, and then terrorize each other in between action cut.
That's the Aussie in you. You got to go have a bevy, I guess, afterwards to make sure everyone gets back together.
It's definitely gallows humor. It's soldier humor. It's like dealing with terrible things through sarcasm and irony and a little bit of joke. But we all knew that we were pushing down some awful stuff too.
All right, they're wrapping me. I know you're not going to tell me anything about Obi-Wan anyway, but tell me something to make folks excited about it.
Can you put look? It's exciting. I just think it's exciting that we get to revisit that material. I actually don't know a lot, and if I knew it and I told you,
you'd have to kill me.
They'd probably kill me, and I'd have to kill you, but I'd have to kill you first. Otherwise, I'd be dead.
Down for it. Thank you.
No, I think they're just excited to keep it as a surprise for the audience. I think that's why all the secrecy, so we can all watch it rather than talk about it beforehand. But
you came all this way on the railroad?
Yeah. I left behind all those peoples.
We talked a little bit about this before, but really talk about working with Barry, because you're like one of my last interviews. Everyone talked about that was the first reason why they signed up, was just I wanted to work with him. And then talk about him sort of guiding you through this on set.
Well, yeah, of course. I count me as another one of those people that really wanted to work with him, because I really did. But I think, the thing about Barry is that he's such a normal, down to earth guy, but he's got the brain of deity. It's like this is the kind of man that, he collaborates. He's very open and he's very calm, and still has a very specific vision, and he's always thinking, and he's always trying to find ways to tell the story and to refine the story and to find new ways that will fit into this world that he's sort of crafted. And it's incredible to see a mind like that at work, and to just be there while it's firing on all cylinders.
What's interesting too is for much of the cast, these are folks that he's working with kind of for the first time, but behind the scenes, he brings so many familiar faces from the Moonlight world. I mean, he brought back Nicholas Britell and Joy. Did you guys see that on set, folks that from the behind the scenes aspect had worked with Barry for years? And what did they say about this idea that they keep signing up to do his projects?
I didn't always connect the dots, just because I needed to not be scared of people. It's easy for me to get intimidated, and I mean, I'm often very intimidated, and I was very intimidated by Barry for a while. And I eventually was just like, I think it's a good thing that I don't know everyone's story, that we're just in this moment trying to make this thing. And so if I did encounter people on set that had worked with Barry previously, I didn't know about it until way after the fact. I just sort of all y'all have made things that have been so effective to me. I only have room for so much intimidation for so many people in one day. And I kind of need to just keep the slate pretty blank.
Well, I'm actually kind of glad to hear that, because as a writer, just writing about Barry's work, the first time I wrote about Moonlight, I had like a mini panic attack. So that is just so assuring, because I was like, I don't have the words to convey to people how awesome this man is. And I think they should find another writer. So I really love that you walked on set with that same energy, because I think it's testament to how awesome he is. I will say this though, too, it's not an easy shoot. Barry talked about that, having the advisors and having everyone sort of there. But when I spoke to Joel, he also talked about how everybody developed a bit of almost like soldier humor and gallows humor, because they needed to escape from it too. And I would imagine that was maybe something that you probably maybe gravitated towards too. So what were you doing to keep it light on the outside? Because I know if I was in it, just knowing my own personal anxiety, I'd be like, every comedy special ever made is going to be my daily playlist.
Yeah, honestly, it's like on set, we did just very much shake it out in between takes, as long as it didn't compromise the integrity of the scene. But then on top of that, we hung out as a cast a lot, doing real dumb fun stuff. Like we would go bowling, we would go to Top Golf and throw our clubs out in the middle of the green because we can't golf, and sing karaoke. I mean, like, we did a lot of that stuff to sort of just connect and to sort of live in the joy. Because the other thing is, like, there is a lot of joy in the story. In the midst of something that is so heavy, there are moments that are joyful. And I think that I feel like I needed to cling to those as much as I could, just so my mind would stay right. And I could just sort of get through the next day. So it's but Joel's absolutely right. There was a lot of odd humor that made its way into the world that we were all playing in.
Well, I like that, and I would have done the same thing. They're wrapping me, but I definitely wanted to leave you on this part too. There's a lot of slave narratives that have been out there. I mean, Oscar-winning ones and very important ones. What would you say to folks about this one that makes it different, and why they should still tune in on it? Because some folks would say, do we need another? And I know, having seen it, they absolutely do.
Well, I think the first thing is, take care of yourself. That's job one. You know, it's like we're all going through a lot. Take care of yourself. It is my hope that eventually folks can watch it, and I hope we can like start to push some really difficult conversations about who we would have been in that moment and who we are in this moment that we're living through. Because I think we all would like to think that we would have been abolitionists, and we would not have been. And there's many injustices that I see that I'm not doing anything about, but I know it's wrong. And so, and I mean, like, I'm hoping that, you know, it's like, and look, this thing lives online. If you can't do it right now, that's fine. Take your time. But at the core of it, I think it's take care of yourself. That's what I hope people do. And I hope people watch it when they're ready. It's there when they feel like it.
What belongs to you?